This is the story of Earl Hurricane Hughes, taken from Guitar One magazine. Story, June 2002. In the eye of the hurricane. In his first interview since going public with his tragic story, Guitar One presents an exclusive glimpse at the life and very fast times of a fallen blues hero, Earl Hurricane Hughes. On the front porch of a rundown gray farmhouse just outside of Clarksdale on Old Highway 49, Earl Hurricane Hughes sits in a straight back wicker chair. One thick lens of his spectacles cracked slightly. Dark, leathery skin with gray stubble. I know, he says. I've never been much to look at. I stopped trying long ago. You got that right, says a woman from inside the house. Hughes smiles. I step inside a screen door. The noisy springs slap the door shut. That's Elsie. She take care of me, he grins. You go on now and shut that up, he says in her direction. His gap teeth are brown from chaw. At 91, after enduring pneumonia, arthritis, and the fast-lane lifestyle of a promising bluesman, old Hurricane's 6-foot frame is a shadow of what it once was. Born in 1910 or thereabouts, Hughes grew up picking cotton from the time he could stand on 2 feet. Though his memory's sketchy, he remembers sitting around a fire before bedtime, listening to his uncle's duet on acoustic guitars. They had this pickin' number I think they called Wine Barrel Blues or Wine Keg Rag or something that really got me going. Boy, did they swap some licks. They was jugs and a washboard too. As he talks, I notice an old guitar hanging on the wall behind him. Not a guitar, actually. It's more like a crudely shaved tree limb bolted to a battered black tin frying pan, strung with some fishing wire. That was my very first guitar as a kid. I rigged that up when I was 8, 9. I just keep it there to remind me of where I come from. Hughes picked up the guitar for the first time when his uncle Sleepy was away. He never come back, he says with a tsk. No one knows what happened. Body never been found. Never got a proper burial. Tsk. Elsie puts out a plate of warm biscuits and gravy. She sets down a corked brown jug. Hughes reaches for the jug and uncorks it with a quiet thwack. Legend has it that Earl Hurricane Hughes got his nickname the day he stood face to face with a Gulf Coast hurricane. It was a night back in 1929 when a 19-year-old Hughes set on honoring a booking that night at Galveston, Texas barroom. Brave torrential rain and whipping winds. That night, Hughes was on a promising bill with a then young Texan, T-Bone Walker. It was rare for a Delta bluesman to join a Texan on tour, but Hughes, for 18 brief months in 1929 and 1930, was one of the fastest rising young guns in the South, and his jerry-rigged itinerary crisscrossed with Walker's that night in Galveston. Hughes headlining when it appeared Walker was a no-show on account of the weather, lit the joint up with his red-hot guitar. In fact, or so the story goes, Hughes sent that hurricane packing with a long night of slashing acoustic blues. I don't know about that story, says Hughes, laughing quietly. I like it, but I don't remember what the weather was like that night. I just played my guitar and got paid. The hurricane, well, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Still Still, that night in Galveston was Hurricane Hughes' defining moment. From there, as word of his ability began to spread, the future looked bright. A music executive from the American Recording Company, the same firm that sponsored the original Robert Johnson sessions in 1936, came a-knockin', as did Lester Melrose from the Bluebird label. What they liked was Hughes' rough-hewn technique. As a player, Hughes paid little attention to form and structure. He preferred to improvise lyrics and whip out chords at will on his steel-bodied guitar. He was an especially effective slide player on tracks like "You've Got to Let Me Go Now, Baby," "Billy Goat Blues," and "Can't Afford No Pearls." Hughes found a way to juice up the intensity with deep slicing slide runs. His voice, a coarse instrument in its own right, wound its way through these songs like a moaning blacksnake. His crudely constructed blues, unrefined as it was, proved to be magnetic. For those 18 months or so, audiences everywhere responded with sustained applause and hollers. But Hughes and the blues were not meant to be. In 1929, the Great Depression hit. Besides paralyzing the country's economy, it sent many blues players scurrying back to their tobacco plantations, looking for steady money. And so it was with Hughes. "I hated it," he says of working the fields. "Every time I think of it, I could spit. That I put down my guitar to work in that shithole. I tell you, I could spit." And so he did. One night, after a particularly grueling day in the fields, Hughes ducked into the plantation supply cabin, stole a couple of jugs of moonshine, and took off, guitar in one hand, whiskey in the other. "I didn't know what to expect," Hughes says, his hand shaking as he pushes his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "I had my guitar, and I was going to play. The good Lord gave me these hands to play guitar, not pick tobacco. I do what the good Lord intended. But the good Lord hadn't intended what would come next." Hughes went on a jag of drinking and general lechery, ducking into juke joints and barbecues from Hobson to Durham and on to Boone, Lorand, and Claremont. Though he knew no one along the way, he left a trail of used women, betrayed men, and a few pissed-off bar owners to pick up the pieces after a knockdown brawl. "I remember one girl in particular," says Hughes. "She was all prettied up. Her hair was smelling nice, and she had a pretty little red dress on, and legs was all shiny. Yes, sir, I remember that one. One night, a full week after leaving the plantation, Hughes shacked up with another pretty cotton picker in Claremont, met with trouble. The woman's date for the night incensed at Hughes' foolhardy behavior, smashed a bottle of bourbon over Hughes's head. In return, Hughes came back at the guy with the only thing he had nearby, his steel guitar. With all the gusto of a home run swing, he coiled and released that guitar, which must have weighed a good 25 pounds. Right across the man's temple, down he went like a domino. Hughes says, smacking his two hands, one on top of the other, "I never seen a man fall like that one did. He stiffened up like he was frozen, and that old guitar didn't see a scratch." But the law caught up with Hughes. He spent a fortnight trudging through cornfields, trying to stay out of sight and out of trouble, but he couldn't hack being on the lam. I tried playing on the street one day, about 2 weeks after the fact. I needed money, you see, and that was the only way to get some quick. He put his hat down on the sidewalk and began to play a version of a song he had worked on while in the corn, Long Stalking Blues, with a Robert Johnson-style walking bass line. He played guitar behind his head and between his legs. Soon a crowd gathered and the hat filled up, until, of course, someone recognized him from the juke joint. I was doing fine till I felt an arm around my neck, laughs Hughes. I didn't know who ended up with all that money in that hat. Hughes spent the next 25 years of his life at Parchman Farm Penitentiary, a joint infamous for holding more than its share of hard-living blues personalities. He'd been found guilty of second-degree homicide and sentenced to 25 years to life. When he was released in 1955, Hughes had nowhere to go. At 45, his spirit broken, he retreated to his hometown. I was never so lost in my life, he recalls. I think if I had my druthers, I'd have stayed in jail. That's how lost I was. Hurricane would never regain the audience he had earned for himself in 1929 and 1930. He never made a record, never toured longer than a week or two. In fact, his legend had all been but erased from blues lore. You bet I regret it, says Hughes. Sure do. When I was 19, I was the man. I was it. Then what? Then nothing. That's what. Elsie comes out onto the porch wearing a house dress and a kerchief to hold back her graying hair. She places the big steel guitar, that murder weapon, on Hurricane's lap in a green glass bottleneck on his finger. He adjusts it briefly, then, with a single sweep of his thumb and a natural shake of his left hand, a chord rings out that would roll Robert Johnson onto his grave.